A lot of people think burnout just means I've been working hard, I'm tired, I need a weekend. But real burnout is deeper than that because there comes a point where you're not just tired anymore. You don't feel like yourself. You're shorter with people. You're emotionally drained. And even when you try to rest, it doesn't really fix it. So in this video, I want to walk you through 3 signs that your burnout may be more serious than you think, and what to do before it even gets worse. I'm Cyrus Ausar. I run a burnout recovery center, wrote Burned Out but Built for More, and have spent over 25 years leading community impact. The goal is to be better than we are yesterday and apply that every day. First, let's clear something up. Before I get into the signs, I want to say something very important. Not every hard week is burnout. Not every stressful season is burnout. Life sometimes can just be heavy. Work can be demanding, but burnout is different. Burnout is when the pressure has been sitting on you for too long, that it starts challenging how you think, how you feel, and how you show up. That's when you need to pay attention. Not just tired, this is the first major sign. And honestly, this is where most people miss it because they think, I'm just tired. I need more sleep. I just need to get through the week. But emotional exhaustion is different. This is when you feel like one more thing is going to push you over the edge. One more email, one more responsibility, one more person needing something from you. And internally you're saying, I don't have the capacity for this right now. That's not just tired, that's significantly deeper. Let me tell you a story about a teacher and a nurse. I've seen a lot of this with teachers. One teacher I worked with was really passionate about helping kids. That's why they got into it in the first place. But over time, the job became heavier than the mission. It wasn't just about teaching anymore. It was the emails, behavior issues, pressure from administration, parents, trying to pour into students while running on empty. And they told me something that stuck with me. They said, I still care, but I don't have the same emotional energy I used to. That's important. They didn't lose passion, they lost capacity. And I see the same patterns with nurses. One nurse told me, I still care about people, but by the end of the day, I feel like I'm going to have nothing left to give. These long shifts, these constant needs, people in pain, families overwhelmed, always being needed, and over time, that emotional weight builds up. And this is what people do not realize. When you're constantly giving without enough recovery, you don't lose who you are, you just run out of energy to express it. And this doesn't happen to just teachers and nurses. It happens to anyone who constantly giving without enough space to recover. Sometimes people think they've lost their passion, when in reality, they've lost their emotional capacity. When I rest, do I actually feel restored? Or do I feel emotionally heavy afterward? Am I becoming easily overwhelmed than I used to? Because one of the clearest signs of burnout is this. Rest stops working the way it used to. And that's when you need something deeper that needs to be addressed. This one is huge. And a lot of people feel ashamed when this starts happening because they start noticing they're more irritated than usual. Their patience is shorter. Little things are starting to bother them more. People ask for something simple, and internally it feels huge. You don't always say it out loud, but you feel yourself getting agitated much faster than before. That matters because when burnout deepens, it starts affecting how you relate to people. This can look like your clients irritating you faster, your family getting a shorter version of you, your coworkers feeling like too much. Compassion starts to fade. And that can be scary when you're someone who normally cares deeply. Because now you're sitting there thinking, why am I so irritated? Why am I reacting like this? Why do I feel like I want everybody to just leave me alone? That's often not because you're a bad person. is because your emotional system is overloaded. This is one of the reasons I always tell people, burnout changes your fuse. And if you don't catch it, you'll start thinking the problem is your personality. When in reality, the problem is your depletion. You're not becoming a worse person. You're becoming a more depleted one. That's different. And it's important not to confuse the two. Sign 3, you start feeling like what you're doing doesn't even matter. This one is powerful because it usually doesn't happen at the beginning. It happens after burnout has been sitting for a while. This is when you start thinking, what's the point? Even if I do this right, it doesn't really change anything. Why am I even trying this hard? That is dangerous because now burnout is not just affecting your energy, it's affecting your meaning. And once meaning start disappearing, people begin feeling emotionally disconnected from their own life. This is where many high performers get stuck. This is especially common in people who are used to doing well because they're not used to feeling ineffective. They're used to making things happen. So when burnout starts making them feel disconnected from their impact, it can really mess with them internally. And sometimes this is where depression and burnout start overlapping in a way that needs to be taken seriously. That's why this matters. Burnout is often misdiagnosed. This is one of the biggest things I've learned from working with people. A lot of people think they know where their burnout is actually coming from, but they're wrong. They'll say, it's my job, it's my schedule, it's my workload. And sometimes it is, but many times that's not the full story. I worked with someone who thought their burnout was coming from work, but as we kept talking, the real issue wasn't the job, it was grief. They had never fully dealt with the loss of their parents, and that emotional weight had been quietly draining them for a long time. So yes, work felt hard, but the deeper issue was what they were carrying emotionally. That's why I always tell people, you cannot heal burnout if you only treat the place it shows up and ignore the place where it's actually coming from. That's a huge difference. So what do you do if you recognize these signs? If you saw yourself in any of those signs, the goal is not to panic. The goal is to respond early, because burnout gets harder to fix the longer it goes ignored. So here are a few things I would start doing immediately. This is first for a reason. A lot of people know they're not okay, but they keep talking themselves out of it. They say things like, I'm fine. I'll get through it. It's not that bad. But if your emotional capacity is low, your fuse is short, and your sense of meaning is fading. That is not something to just brush off. Take it seriously, because the sooner you name it, the sooner you can begin to change it. This is one of the most important questions. Not what am I tired of, but what is actually draining me? Those are two different questions, because what drains you may not be what's most visible. Sometimes the drain is unresolved grief, unspoken frustration, constant pressure, identity tied too heavily to performance, never feeling emotionally safe enough to stop. That's where self-awareness matters. Most people wait until they're falling apart to rest. This is way too late. You need small recovery points throughout your life. That can be quiet time without your phone, walking without stimulation, real conversations with people you trust, movement, something that reconnects yourself outside of your performance. Not fake rest, not scrolling, but real recovery. This one is huge because one of the fastest ways to intensify burnout is to let your job become your whole identity. If everything you do revolves around performance, then every bad season hits you harder. So ask yourself, who am I outside of what I produce? What gives me peace outside of achievement? What parts of me have I neglected because I've been too busy surviving? That matters more than people realize. This is especially important if your patience has changed a lot. You feel emotionally numb, you feel detached from your work or life, rest is no longer helping, your relationships are starting to feel affected. This is not just time to just tough it out. This is the time to get support. Whether that means a coach, a therapist, time off, deeper reflection, changing parts of your environment. Do not wait until your system fully crashes to take yourself seriously. A better outcome is possible. And here's the part I really want you to hear. I've seen people come in thinking that they were losing themselves, only to realize they were just deeply depleted. I've seen teachers reconnect with the reason they started. I've seen nurses stop blaming themselves for being tired and finally start building recovery into their life. I've seen professionals who thought they were becoming cold realize they were just emotionally overloaded, and once they started taking their burnout seriously, they began feeling like themselves again. Not overnight, but gradually. More peace, more clarity, more patience, more capacity. That matters, because burnout can make you feel like you're disappearing, but recovery reminds you you're still in there. You've just been carrying too much for too long. If you recognize these signs, that doesn't mean you're broken. It means your mind and your body are trying to get your attention. And honestly, that awareness can become the turning point. Because once you start ignoring what you feel, you can finally start rebuilding. Not just your schedule, not just your energy, but your relationship with yourself. And that's where real burnout recovery begins. If this resonated with you, comment reset below and I'll send you the Burnout Check-In Workbook. It's a simple way to understand where your burnout is coming from and how to start rebuilding. And if you're new here, this channel is all about helping people who feel overwhelmed, overworked, or stuck find their way back to clarity and energy.